Good afternoon and good morning to everyone, and welcome to today's Arrange for Webcast with me, Helen Beal. Today I'm going to be talking about value stream mapping and metrics that matter. So just before we start proper, I just wanted to share a little good news and have a little celebration with you. We love celebrations in DevOps. Yesterday it was announced that we've been awarded the Most Innovative DevOps Solution Provider Award from the DevOps Dozen. That's from DevOps.com. So we're really proud and very grateful to all of the people that voted for us. So thank you for that. And also I'm very thankful to Alan Schimmel of the team at DevOps.com for making these awards happen. We do work really hard at Range 4, listening to our customers and what people need to help them move the needle on DevOps and customer innovation. And we do continuously strive to improve and add things to our portfolio, which will help people do work better. And from that, let's move into one of those tools, which is our value stream mapping offering. So let's review the agenda briefly. So I've tried to keep the agenda fairly simple. So we're going to start by looking at the relationship between value stream mapping and DevOps. And then we'll have a look at why you might want to consider investing the time in a value stream mapping exercise, what outcomes you could expect from it, and what you could expect to or hope to achieve from it. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on metrics that really matter, and I've put in the word really there. It's not normally there, but just to make that real differentiation. And then finally, we're going to finish with some logistical view on how a VSM or a value stream mapping exercise actually runs, how we run them at Range 4, and what the various artifacts and how long it takes and who should be there and all of that kind of stuff. So first of all, let's take a look at the relationship between these two things. As you know, at Range 4, we're DevOps transformation consultants or DevOps evolution drivers, if you like. So why are we interested in value stream mapping? What is the relationship between these two things? So those of you who've heard me speak before may very well have heard me use the term the harmonious polygamous marriage that is DevOps. It's a term that I stole from our very good friend, the wonderful Jane Grohl, who runs the DevOps Institute and the ITSM Academy. We were doing one of those online Twittery conferencey things, can't remember what you call them, and she used it and I jumped on it because I thought it explained really clearly how DevOps is a convergence of these like evolutionary methodologies. It's how they're all kind of coming together and becoming what Jane and I like to call the DevOps box, the body of knowledge. Back in December, however, I was out in Munich speaking at DevOps Con. I was speaking about the correlations between DevOps and holacracy, a talk I've done a few times since I debuted at DevOps Enterprise Summit with Lego in the summer. And I was also doing another talk on how DevOps proliferates through an organization. And John Willis, and if you don't know who John Willis is, don't worry, because I'm going to mention him at least 2 more times in the next 15 minutes. John Willis watched my talk on the holacracy correlations, and we had a chat the next day, and he said it's quite interesting, actually, because he was telling me that he thinks of this three-legged stool of DevOps, and his three-legged stool that he refers to is the theory of constraints and safety culture and learning organization. We started to think, actually, there's sort of this big thing going on. There's actually lots of these methodologies that are contributing to the DevOps BOK or body of knowledge. So we're starting to talk about this emerging DevOps super pattern, which you can see represented there. So I've mentioned the marriage of lean and agile and ITSM. I've mentioned how we think holacracy is inputting from an agile organizational perspective. And then I've mentioned the theory of constraints, which will come to the Phoenix Project book, actually, again, in a little while, but underpins a lot of what happens in there, and then safety culture and organization. And behind that, the diagram there, you can see there's a watermark of some coins, and that's actually some British currency. It's our £2 coin. And you can see around the edge, imprinted in the edge, is you might see some of it. It's actually standing on the shoulders of giants. And that was Isaac Newton was quite famous for saying it in about, I think it was 1679, something like that. He sees further because he's standing on the shoulders of giants. And this is what we're kind of saying is DevOps is standing on these giants of lean and holacracy and agile, and it's standing there and it's seeing further. The phrase itself actually can, I think, be traced back to about the 12th century, although for me personally, it kind of reminds me of the Oasis album in the 1990s. But I digress. So let's move on. Of course, today we're talking specifically about Lean and Lean's contribution to this body of knowledge and its relationship to DevOps as a whole. So Lean, as you're probably familiar with, came out of Toyota, so with their lean manufacturing. So it came from manufacturing. We're applying it to all sorts of different business, but really here we're bothered about how we apply it to IT, so lean IT. And there's two kind of fundamental principles the way I see it under lean. One is to reduce waste and the other is to increase customer focus. So we're really talking about flow and we're talking about increasing value. So I mentioned the Phoenix project just a moment ago when I mentioned the theory of constraints. If you, I don't know where you guys who's on the call, where you are in your journey on DevOps, but we often, almost daily, probably multiple times a day sometimes, recommend people start when they're trying to learn about DevOps and what DevOps is all about by reading the Phoenix project. It was published quite a few years ago now, maybe 5 years, and written by Gene Kim and Kevin Bear and George Spafford, and it tells the story of a company called Parts Limited who have a project called the Phoenix Project, which is not going very well. And in the book, which is written it is a novel, so it makes it very engaging to read, but we meet Bill, who becomes the interim CIO, much against his will, and we meet Sarah, the head of retail operations, and Brent, who's a hero in development, and we meet John, who's in security, and we go through this journey with them as they transform the way that they work, so in a DevOps manner, and start the company on a road to recovery. So we monitor things like share price and revenue, and we'll come back to those sort of questions when we get to the metrics that matters section later on in this talk. Underpinning the Phoenix project, though, and underpinning DevOps are these three principles, or the three ways of these principles. So the three ways are, the first one is the flow. So the flow of the work between Dev and Ops. The second way is about amplified feedback loops, and the third way is about experimentation and learning. So you're starting to see the similarities here between what we talk about when we talk about Lean and what we talk about when we talk about DevOps. So both very much concerned with flow. The amplified feedback loops is all about getting feedback from the customer into the process. So Gene published another book in October of last year, the DevOps Handbook. I said I was going to mention John Willis a couple more times in the next 15 minutes from that first mention. So this is the second time I'm going to mention him. So he is a co-author of the DevOps Handbook, as is Patrick Dubois, who was was the originator, of the DevOps term as a Twitter hashtag. So generally seen as sort of the godfather or grandfather or whatever, the originator of the DevOps term. And also Jez Humble, who put the L in CALMS, and we'll come back to CALMS shortly as well. And then also, of course, Gene. So when the DevOps Handbook came out, we were very excited to see its references to value streams, because we'd already made this connection. We were also already helping people start on their journey, or DevOps transformation, or DevOps evolution, or using VSM as a tool to help people start making change and start visualizing the change. So when the DevOps Handbook was published, we were excited to see two main chapters, one about using value stream to start off with, and then secondly, chapter 6 about understanding the value stream. So that's essentially doing a value stream mapping exercise across it. So we've learned a bit about the relationship between DevOps and value stream mapping. So let's now have a closer look at why you might want to do a value stream mapping exercise, why you might want to invest your time, because it isn't, it is quite time hungry. We'll come at the end when we talk about logistics about how much time you're going to expect to invest in it, but it's no mean, easy thing to do in half an hour. So most organisations have been around for some time. Some of the organisations we work with are over 100 years old. Some are quite new as well, but when we get a company and build an organisation, we're bringing together a bunch of humans that are all trying to do things together and trying to get work done. And we all have slightly different perspectives, and we often do things in slightly different ways. So you're probably looking at these questions, and you probably were thinking you're going to be answering yes to the questions in grey on the left, and no to the questions in green on the right. So what we're really doing with value stream mapping is we're trying to switch that round. So we're trying to resolve these tensions, and we're trying to answer these questions, or trying to visualize what an organizational value stream looks like. So a value stream map essentially allows you to see the work. So those of you that are lean conversant or agile conversant will already be probably pretty familiar with Kanban. And you'll know that Kanban is a way of visualizing work. So it's a way of getting people stood up in a room or at a board and seeing which work needs to be done, prioritizing it, pulling it through, and understanding what velocity looks like. So this is another lean tool that allows you to see the work. But this time we're looking at the work of a whole value stream. So let's have a little think about what a value stream is. It's basically anything that has a request and a deliverable. So at Range 4, we often talk about this ideation to realization concept. So that's effectively the value stream. So we'll look at the ideation to realization cycle in a little bit more detail in a moment. But for the time being, if you just think of that as the value stream, some people refer to it as aha to ka-ching. Some people cache to concept, although concept is not far enough for us. We want to know what value is being created and being delivered real time at the end of it. So what we're really trying to do with DevOps and with value stream mapping is the same thing. So that spring in the middle, we're trying to shrink that spring, shrink that time from going to having an idea about what a feature might want to look like and delivering some real value to your customers and your users. So thinking more about why you might want to do value stream mapping, what you could expect to get out of a value stream mapping exercise. This is an example of one we did early in 2016 at Vocalink, now becoming part of MasterCard. And really the headline benefit is we reduced the value stream from 354 elapsed days to just 89. That's about a 75% improvement, and that is not uncommon. It's not unusual to get over 50% regularly when we're looking at value stream mapping. There is a lot of waste that we can identify. In Vocalink's case, the waste was mainly around a profusion of change advisory boards. Again, not an unusual thing in organisations. They cause problems with delay and handoffs, rework, all sorts of problems. Lots of organisations also haven't fully taken on Agile as yet, so that is something else that helped us squish this value stream down here. And then another big bit was around automation, so doing things like environment provisioning, which was a 6-week process, and really bringing that process down. So we've had a look at the relationship between DevOps and value stream mapping, and we've just had a why you might want to do value stream mapping, which is basically to take a load of waste out of process, save yourself a load of time, deliver things much faster. Let's have a think now about these metrics that really matter, the really important things. So I said I was going to mention John Willis 3 times in the first 15 minutes. This is the 3rd time. So John Willis was the originator of an acronym that we use regularly in DevOps to describe as quickly as we can really the scope of what DevOps is about. So I think of it as like an elevator pitch. So something you'd say if you got stuck in an elevator with a CEO that asked you a question and you only had seconds to explain what you were talking about. So John Willis actually started with the CAMS acronym. So when I said that Jez Humble put the L in calms, this is what I meant. He put lean in CAMS. So John Willis originally came up with culture, automation, metrics, and sharings as the 4 lenses, if you like, or the pillars of what DevOps is about. And Jez came along and suggested that an L should go in there as well. So Jez Humble, if you don't know much about him, is the writer of a couple of books like Continuous Delivery Book and The Lean Enterprise. Obviously very well thought of, co-wrote the DevOps Handbook, also a big contributor, or runs the annual State of DevOps survey with Puppet Labs, which is another great resource if you're learning about DevOps. So obviously we're talking about the L today, so thanks Jez, we're talking about lean, but we are also talking about the M right now. So metrics are really important when we're doing DevOps. They're really important because we need to know what direction of travel we want to go, and if we don't understand where we're coming from, we don't understand where we're going. We also love to know where we're at and celebrate success in range 4. We don't, in DevOps, and a particular range 4. We like to know that we're going in the right direction. So we have to, if we have to go backwards, God forbid, we need to understand why we need to do that, or if we need to pivot or change direction. And metrics helps us do all of that. But it's really important that we get the right ones. And it won't surprise you, or this sounds a bit simple, but most organisations that we work with either have far too few or none, or way too many, and they're hardly ever the right ones. So we do a lot of work with people in trying to understand which metrics are really important to them. So it's kind of like a standard set of DevOps metrics that we often use. In fact, we use them in our DevOps lift-off workshop. We use it. We give this out like a matrix to the teams. So we have a big group of people and we'll split them into smaller groups, and then we'll give them this metrics matrices to fill out. It really tells us and them a lot about their shared understanding of their situation, their shared appreciation for what their target state looks like. It builds the basis of building investment cases for change. So these DevOps metrics, kind of this frequency of release and the time it takes to make a release, how often you're getting a defect and how long it takes to fix a defect, how often there's outages happening and how long it takes you to recover, so the MTTR or the mean time to recovery or response, whichever R you like to put in there. These are kind of DevOpsy ones, and to an extent they're better, if you like, than a lot of metrics like server utilization or network speed or whatever, in terms of being a bit more useful to the business. But they're still not business metrics. In fact, when we do this in the DevOps lift-off workshop, what we do is we put business metrics on the top of the matrices and wait and hope that someone's going to point out that these are not actually business metrics. They are still IT metrics. So Gene Kim's books, the Phoenix Project that we already talked about, and the DevOps Handbook, are published by his group, the IT Revolution Press. And they also published another book last year by Mark Schwartz, which is The Art of Business Value, which is a great read. It's quite short and it's quite fun to read as well. But Mark says quite early on in the book, he says this, that DevOps, in a sense, is about setting up a value delivery factory, a streamlined, waste-free pipeline through which value can be delivered to the business with a predictable cycle time. So there's a couple of takeaways from that. One is about cycle time. So cycle time is really important, and we'll probably keep on labouring this point. But the other one is about value. Now, the book is, of course, called The Art of Business Value. And what Mark does is kind of pull apart what we try and do when we talk about business value, and kind of looks at ROI and how ROI is too static, and comes up with some suggestions around looking at things like options. And it's a great read, but we won't talk too much about it here today in the interest of time. But the takeaways there are: think about cycle time, think about value. Now, many of you will know that the Agile Manifesto was born at a ski resort called Snowbird in Utah. And the guys kind of reconvened later, and you'll probably know that the first principle of the Agile Manifesto is around the continuous delivery of valuable software. And it was kind of like a bit later that people start to think, no one told us how to measure value, though. And Mark makes this point in the book. And in fact, you'll get these slides after the webcast, and there is a link in the notes of this one which takes you to a blog by Philip, which talks about the elephants in the room. And the 13th elephant is this problem about value not being defined. So as Mark says, DevOps is formed without content until we address the question of what goes into the pipeline. And most importantly for me, what happens when product emerges at the other end. So this value question again, how do we measure the value of that product that is emerging at the other end? So I mentioned this. This is a continuous release cycle, effectively. We call it the DevOps loop at range 4. You can see it represents ideation to realization and has some other kind of steps, if you like, we go through, but we're trying to avoid what we were doing for years in terms of representing SDLCs in a very linear, sequential, siloed manner. We're really trying to represent that we are constantly going around in small iterations, gaining feedback, going round and round and round. But the really key one for us is realization. So it's about making sure that that thing happens and we understand what it's delivering in terms of value to the customer or user when it's delivered. So that's some hints on how we get to what metrics really matter for people. There are also some metrics that we need to talk about when we're talking about value stream mapping. So we have three main metrics. I'm going to talk about two here and then a third in a moment. So the first one we talk about is process time, and you can see that there are some other similes or synonyms, if you like, for process time. So processing time, touch time, work time, task time. And this is the time that it actually takes for the work to happen. So it's the time, if you're in a hospital, to see a patient. It's the time to code a bit of code. It's the time to actually try and fix a defect. It's the time to actually bring a server back up or provision a piece of cloud. It's that actual process time. Then around that, we have the lead time, also referred to throughput time, response time, or turnaround time. And then you can see in the graphic on the bottom left, it shows how these two relate together. So when we do a value stream mapping exercise, we are looking at these two metrics the whole time. And we'll kind of talk about the difference between a value stream and a process in a moment. But you'll see that the lead time overarches the process time, because work is often idle. So you could receive a piece of work on a service desk, but you'll have a queue of 20 other things. So actually you're not going to get to that thing for 2 or 3 hours anyway, and it's only a set of 3, so it's not going to get up the list. But then it needs to go back to development, and they're busy doing something else, so it waits a little while until they get to work on the fix, and then it comes back into testing. And you can see how we get all of this work mapped out. And that graphic there on the bottom left is from Karen Martin, who is one of the leaders in terms of value stream mapping thinking, and has written a great book also on it. So the third metric I just mentioned that we're concerned with when we do value stream mapping is percent complete and accurate. So this metric is discovered by talking to and walking through the value stream and talking to the people, the actors or the customers downstream of the process, and asking them what percentage of work that they receive that they're expected to act upon does not require clarification, correction, or additional information, so it doesn't need to be completed. So how much work do they receive that is in a form that they can immediately get on with their step? And this is one of the most enlightening metrics that we use when we do value stream mapping. It's a tough one emotionally for some people as well, if they kind of hadn't been aware that what they were producing was actually, if you'd like to say, poor quality. And this is where some more DevOps thinking comes in really important. When you do a value stream mapping exercise, it's really important to have a really strong facilitator that understands how to create a blame-free environment, because when we're looking at waste and looking at problems, it's easy for people to feel like they're in the wrong and get defensive, and we really need to avoid that as much as possible, because we need to think positively about where we're going, which brings me on to the next bit, which is how to VSM. So I'm going to talk you through how we do value stream mapping exercises at Range 4. And first of all, let's just make this differentiation between value stream mapping and process mapping. So value stream mapping is very high level. It's macro, where process is micro. It looks at whys and not hows. It generally has a heavy leadership involvement, where when we're doing process mapping, there's kind of more involvement from what I like to call the doers, the people that are actually doing the physical work. So you can see that a value stream effectively looks across a number of processes. And that will probably become clearer in a minute when we look at a current value stream map. It's probably important to note here as well, actually, that when we do a value stream mapping exercise, it often leads us into doing one or more process mapping exercises. So we'll start by looking at the whole value stream, work out how to improve the time between the two processes, and then we might dive into a process like testing, for example, and take a much closer look at where we can make additional improvements there. So here's a question for you to think about while we're doing this. How many value streams do you have in your organisation? So value stream, if you remember, we were looking at that light bulb, dollar or pound spring diagram a few slides ago. You're thinking about anything in your organisation where someone receives a customer request and there is a deliverable at the end of it. And some organisations, very small ones, might only have one, and lots have many, many more. So just kind of think about that, and think about if you were to invest some time to mapping a value stream, which would be a good one, and why? Which one would benefit or bear from having a good look at it? So most people like to say that they like change, so that's a great thing. Change leaders themselves, so our green robot is a rarer, but the fact that you're on this call is probably indicative that you are a change leader or a change agent or a change driver yourself. But this is kind of what we expect to happen next when we ask people who wants to change. All the hands go down and people look a bit like, oh. And this is kind of what I was saying a moment ago about people getting defensive when we ask them to change. So we need to be aware of these kind of cultural habits and norms. And then we get, this just makes me laugh a little bit, we get to hear where if we ask who wants to lead the change, we get everyone leaving the room. So I've put this in here because it's really important. We need executive sponsors when we're doing value stream mapping, and we need owners of the process. I've always talked quite a lot about software development, often looking a bit like people that care about the wedding and not the marriage. So we care about delivering that software or that feature, but we don't care very much often about what happens to it in terms of maintaining it. We don't often care about things like technical debt, and we get ourselves into a lot of trouble. And value stream mapping is a bit like that, in the sense that if you're going to do a value stream mapping exercise, you need to be really committed to what you're going to do after that exercise. So really committed to making that change happen, because change is hard to do and it's hard to make it stick. But let's talk about the logistics a little bit more. So we currently have, and I said at the start of this call when I was talking about the award, at Range 4, we really do continually strive for continuous improvement. So we do change things nearly every time we do them. We kind of get feedback from our customers, or we think of things that could have gone better ourselves, and we inject change into new versions all the time. But at the moment, we're working with 4 VSM artifacts when we do a value stream mapping exercise. So they are the value stream charter, the current value stream map, the future value stream map, and fourthly, the actual transformation plan for the VSM. So it's probably worth just spending a couple of minutes talking about typically how we run a value stream mapping exercise in terms of the amount of time and people and places that we do it. So our favoured way at the moment to run a VSM is to do it in two sets of 2 days, so 2 times 2. The reason that works quite well is because we do ask for leadership representation at a value stream mapping workshop, and it's quite hard often to get that many managers out of the business for a 4-day stretch, but it's normally a lot more feasible to do it in 2 sets of 2. And when I say that many managers, I mean 10 to 20 people in a room. So this is a big workshop. You need to get all of those people at that management level across the value stream in a room together to look at this. The other advantage of doing it in a 2 times 2 format is there's a little gap in between, and that little gap in between you can go back to the business and share with them what you've done already. So you can do a drop-in centre or a lunch and learn or some kind of corporate communications that helps you do 2 things really. One is gain further input from other people that haven't been in the room, so those doers perhaps that are really deeply involved in the processes that are making up the value stream. And the other thing is, often when we're talking about transformation, improvement, change, reorganization, anything like that, it makes people very fearful. So most people have been through some kind of redundancy round in their lives at some point. So it helps to have people involved in your process. And most people, when they're doing VSM, aren't looking to get rid of people. What they're looking to do is really streamline that process and really focus on value. So you remember those lean principles, flow and value. Flow and the customer, getting back there. So the other note to make actually on that in terms of logistics is we really highly recommend that it does not happen on your site. It needs to happen off site. You need to get everyone out of the office and in a place where they can't be disturbed and they can't slope off. So here's an example of the first value stream artifact. This is the value stream charter. The things that I like to note on here are the accountable parties. We've got the executive sponsor and we've got the value stream champion. These 2 are really, really key. So I talked about the value stream champion earlier when we looked at the robots and the change cartoon. Really important that they're fully committed. And in fact, we ask for the value stream charter to be signed. And we actually ask for everybody to sign it off. And so you can see we've got the C signatures on the back, and this is our preferred way of doing it. We could list all the people, but actually we want them to all sign. And you can see it's a bit like A3 thinking, which is another lean thing. So it's a bit like trying to summarize everything we're trying to do on one page. And this is the output from the very first day. And this is the output from the second day. So I said about the 2 times 2 streams. So the first 2 days are all about the current value stream, and the second 2 days are all about the future value stream. So this is a typical current value stream map. You can see it's big, it's messy, there's a lot of post-it notes. Now, the current value stream map, we very rarely make electronic. You can try things like there's a post-it notes make an app where you can photograph post-its on a wall and it will convert them into electronic post-its that you can move around and annotate and stuff, but it doesn't really handle this many post-it notes and overlapping post-it notes and things very well. So this is output of day 2, so the first 2 days. And this is the kind of thing that we learn. So we could learn the amount of people that it's taking to review a business case. We learn the amount of lapsed days and weeks that it's taking for something to do. And we can learn how many people were involved in delivering the project and then make a proportional representation of what is at the company. So these are the kind of things that are kind of mind-blowing stats that come out of the first 2-day workshops, where people kind of go, wow, really had no idea that was so time intensive. And this just, I mentioned earlier about one of the advantages of doing the 2 by 2 days. It's having this gap in the middle where you can do things like a drop-in centre and get people to come in and chat through with members of the team, the VSM team, about what they've been learning. They can put their inputs in. So these are just some photos of a customer that did such a thing. So I really love this phrase. I came across it recently when I was doing a lean agile transformation workshop with Mike Burrows. This phrase, remember the future. And this is what we're really doing in the second 2 days. It's a visualization exercise. We're ripping everything up and starting again and figuring out where the waste is in that value stream and taking out. So this is what the third artifact I talked about. So we do normally make this electronic, and we take all the post-its and then present it like this, so it's easy to share, and it looks really clean and it can be acted upon. And you can see we've got the lead time and the process time and the percentage complete and accurate stats down here as well, and then we've got the number of days. And then the final artifact, the fourth artifact, is the VSM transformation plan. So this is the marriage. This is the bit that is telling everybody what they're going to be doing. And this is where you really might want to consider getting a coach in to make sure that value stream improvement plan or transformation plan, whatever you choose to call it, is acted upon. There are a lot of people involved, a lot of commitments, and people need to not kind of get sucked into their daily lives, and they need to get approval from people to make the changes that have been proposed. So that is the other output. So you've probably got the hint of this already. We do perform value stream mapping exercises regularly with our customers, either standalone or as part of the DevOps transformation. So you really do need a strong facilitator, or 2, we prefer, to keep that room of 20 in control, if you like. So we normally take a set of rules about kind of respecting people speaking and not having mobile phones and laptops, and we normally have a method, either kind of 3 knocks on a desk or holding an arm up if the rooms become quite disrupted. So we need to make sure that everyone has an input, that the discussions stay on track. So for example, it's very easy when we're doing the future value mapping to start slipping into the hows instead of the what's and the whys. So we really need to keep a focus on that. So we are available to facilitate, teach or coach. And I just wanted to leave you with some takeaways from this presentation. So top level, value stream mapping takes huge chunks of waste out of processes. It's a really clever way of visualizing a value stream and figuring out how to do it a lot quicker. As I say, we recommend, we can be flexible on this, but our best working environment, we believe, is 2 times 2 days, so 2 for current, 2 for future. Get the leaders in a room, off-site, we'll facilitate, and this absolutely can be the foundation of a DevOps journey. So that was today's presentation on value stream mapping and metrics that matter. I'm just going to check now and see if I've got any questions. I think I saw one come through from Doug quite a long time ago, so sorry, Doug, for not stopping at that point, but hello again there. So Doug's just saying, I think he saw in one of the slides probably about Vocalink, that Vocalink also took advantage of our DevOps Foundation course. So it's probably worth mentioning that for a few minutes. The DevOps Foundation course is from the DevOps Institute. I sit on the board at the DevOps Institute. We are a registered education provider. The DevOps Foundation course is what it says on the tin. It's a 2-day course. It's mainly theory. You don't bring your laptop and start doing Jenkins or Bitbucket or anything like that. It forms the basis actually for a lot of other courses that are coming through this year as well. So it's a prerequisite to the DevOps Test Engineer, the Continuous Delivery Architect, the DevSecOps Engineer, the DevOps Leader and DevOps Professional courses that are coming out in the next couple of months. And the DevOps Institute, and we also offer the Agile Service Manager, which is like the IT operation equivalent of a Scrum Master, and the Agile Process Owner, which is like the Scrum IT operation equivalent of a Scrum Product Owner. We offer those courses as well. So Doug's actually asked if we have a self-paced training version of it. So we do. We have a public schedule. Actually, the next one, someone else has asked this question. The next one is on the 21st and 22nd of February in London. We're also about to announce a big schedule in India. If anyone on the call is from India, I can't remember if there were any registrations today. And we do, Doug, have an online version of it. So thanks for your email. We'll send over a link to the online version of that. You can choose whether you want to do it in 30 or 60 days. So that is that question. Are there any more questions out there today? So how does Range 4 help sell VSM to management so they get involved? Well, we talk to them really in a very similar way that we have done today. So it's kind of the understanding what the management issues and challenges are that they're trying to address, and then explaining how VSM works, what the outcomes typically are, what we've seen in other organisations that have done it, what the challenges are to getting a VSM happening, and then what the challenges are to making VSM transformation plans happen and stick. So very similar to what we did today. So thanks for that question. And thank you everyone very much for your time today. Please do let us know if you need anything. You know where we are. Thank you and goodbye.